Okay, a proposition I want to lay in front of you. And I mean this seriously. George W. Bush bears some responsibility for the murder of 13 people at Fort Hood. Now, I realize that sounds pretty outrageous, but let me just lay out my logical sequence here, and I believe that by the time I'm done, you will agree with me. Let's, first of all, dial back to when Tim McVeigh blew up the Oklahoma City Federal Building. Tim McVeigh believed, having read the Turner Diaries, that the response of the Clinton White House to that would be to clamp down on Christian, white, gun-owning Americans. That the federal government, when a federal building got blown up like that and hundreds of people killed, that the federal government's response would be to shut down the country and put us into a state of emergency and start taking away people's guns. And the result of that would be that people would rise up and overthrow the government, and there would be a great race and class war, mostly a race war, and all the blacks would be killed, and the Hispanics, and the Jews and Catholics, actually, in Tim McVeigh's world. Catholics not so much. I mean, McVeigh himself was raised Catholic. But that the good white Christian gun owners would be the ones who were left standing. McVeigh, by the way, had left the Catholic Church, although he told Time magazine he still believed in God. This was in a jailhouse interview with him, with Time magazine. Because Bill Clinton responded to that act of terrorism by saying, this is a crime. He didn't do what Tim McVeigh wanted. Instead, he said, this is a crime and the people behind this are criminals. It diminished McVeigh's stature in the world. It diminished, it blew apart his cause, as it were. And it actually gave closure to the families when McVeigh was arrested and convicted, gave closure to the families of the Oklahoma City victims. On the other hand, when George W. Bush was president, and arguably Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda, a group of somewhere between 12 and 20,000 people at the most, a tiny splinter faction of Islam that virtually every Islamic nation in the world had rejected, which is why they had to go to a failed state to have training grounds. Nobody wanted them. None of the Muslims wanted them. When they perpetrated 9/11, and the Muslim world condemned 9/11 and condemned Osama bin Laden, George W. Bush had two choices. He could do the same thing that Bill Clinton did with Tim McVeigh. He could say, okay, it looks to us like Osama bin Laden is behind this, and maybe Khalid Sheikh Mohammed or whoever, and these people are criminals, and we call for the world to come together and find the particular criminals who perpetrated this crime. They are twisted, insane people, and we need to bring them to justice. He could have done that. Or he could have done what McVeigh thought Clinton was going to do, which is overreact. He could have turned, which is what he did. This is what George W. Bush did. He took a play from what every novelist and every screenplay writer knows, that the hero is only as good in any story. The hero is only as good as the bad guy is evil. So if you want to be a superhero, you've got to have a supervillain. Superman without Lex Luthor would be incredibly boring. Batman without the Riddler would be incredibly boring. You've got to have a supervillain. And George Bush's popularity ratings were in the toilet. And so, I mean, there was a big debate in the United States over whether he even legitimately was president of the United States. So what did he do? He turned Osama bin Laden into a super anti-hero, a supervillain, and started bombing another country when we know now, or at least we think we know, that 9/11 was actually planned in apartment buildings in Germany and Spain, and here in the United States. It was not planned in Afghanistan. Nobody has asserted that it was. But Bush started bombing Afghanistan, and then he went into Iraq, which had nothing to do with 9/11. But he thought, hey, as a war president, back in 1999, he had told Mickey Herskowitz, his biographer, this was before he became president, that the biggest mistake his father made was pulling out of Iraq too soon. That if that war had extended itself longer, his father would have gotten reelected because war presidents have more political capital than peacetime presidents. And if he got elected, he was going to have a war, and he was going to have a war in Iraq, and that war would give him the political capital to do the things that he really wanted to do, like privatizing Social Security. And that's exactly what he did. And so George W. Bush, by demonizing largely the entire religion of Islam, by embracing the crazies within Christianity and the Islamophobes within the United States, by making Osama bin Laden the face of Islam worldwide, rather than the face of a criminal, George W. Bush created the division within America and around the world, frankly, that has led to the death of arguably at least 1 million Iraqis, thousands, tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of Afghanis, over 5,000 American soldiers, and who knows how many contractors, mercenaries, and, on it goes. And that led to the tortuous insanity that was acted out by Major Hassan. So there you have it. My argument, George W. Bush has some responsibility for what happened in Fort Hood. I know that the Democratic Party is not going to take this position, but that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.